There's a level of anxiety that comes with starting a new job that I just hate. Not sure if it's just the process of learning what to do, the pressure of proving myself to new coworkers, or just the stress of being in a new environment. But it's been a constant across every job I've ever taken. This newest one piled that anxiety onto the max though, and I don't think I'll be going back after what happened last night. To be perfectly clear, if I end up hitting send on this and you're reading it right now, well, it's not really up to me if I go back to work or not. They're probably going to ship me off to some black site that's further off the map than my current position. 1 week here and I've learned all those conspiracy theories that Americans have about Area 51 barely begin to scratch the surface, so I might as well go for broke and tell the whole story, right? I've been in the Air Force for about 5 years now, and this was supposed to be my latest post. Something that my commanding officers said was a breeze, which I honestly had doubts about considering I've been in Germany for the last 2 years and it was, for lack of a better description, the easiest stuff that I've ever done. They said it would be just as easy, except I would get to be back on home turf in the desert of Nevada. Guard duty isn't that hard anyway, right? Assuming that you're guarding humans. My first day started out like any other that I've had. Get to the base, find the CO there, and get my orders directly from them. They assigned me to this older officer as my trainer, Mills, and he started leading me through the main building towards our post. According to him, all that we had to do was keep an eye on the security cameras for the entire place and notify higher-ups if anything looked out of place. The base itself was, well, what you would expect from a base in the middle of the desert. A few big, nondescript buildings surrounded by fences with a healthy amount of razor wire. I honestly wasn't expecting much when I got in, but imagine my surprise when Mills told me to hop into a golf cart so that we could get to the monitor room. I mean, I always figured there was more to Area 51 than what we could see from the outside. But when we drove at least 4 miles through this huge tunnel on a pretty steep incline, he was talking to me the whole time, asking me if I had found a place to live nearby yet, and telling me about staying away from the Vegas Strip on my days off. It seemed like we were driving for hours though, my stomach getting more and more uneasy with every passing foot, when we finally stopped in front of a small door built into the side of the tunnel. Hey, you're lucky, kid. This has to be the cushiest job in the entire US military. We just watch these screens and give a little check-in every other hour. Sometimes they'll have us do rounds and check out doors. Otherwise, I just sit here and work on my Sudoku puzzles for as long as I want while getting top dollar for it, he said to me when we entered. The room was surprisingly big, with almost the 2 entire walls filled floor to ceiling with monitors that we were supposed to keep track of. Some showed empty gray rooms with nothing but abandoned desks. Others were static shots of desert sand. Another with the exterior of the buildings that we entered through. And then one in the upper right-hand corner caught my eye. What in the world is that? I asked, pointing to the screen in question. Mills gave a chuckle, pulling up a chair at the small desk and grabbing the nearby mouse. With a few clicks, he enlarged the image for me to see better. In the middle of a small all-white room sat a table. On that table was one small body, and at first I honestly thought that it was a kid. Maybe the kid of a superior officer having a nap or something while their dad was working. I don't know. But then when Mills made the picture bigger, I noticed the odd proportions of it. A massive head, long arms and legs with a small torso that seemed barely strong enough to hold up the rest of it. The gray, flushed skin was nearly a pale white that looked sickly against the walls of the room. "You're kidding me, right?" I asked, looking back at Mills. He smiled, shaking his head and putting the screen back on multi-view. "Nope. Welcome to orientation day, kid. That there is an original," he said, taking his seat and pulling out a massive thermos before beginning to pour the contents into a mug. "What did they tell you when you were assigned here?" Nothing, pretty much, I said, mind swirling. There was no way that he had just confirmed the existence of aliens so casually. It was like showing me an animal in a zoo exhibit for him. All he was doing was smiling, watching as I tried to reconcile what I was seeing on the screen, scanning through different views from the cameras. I began to notice even more odd sights. A massive disc and one that had tons of tech set up all around it. A mechanic using an arc welder on one side. Another view showed something in another room. It looked like a concentrated ball of darkness, the occasional tendril reaching outward towards the door, before a light would come on, causing it to snap back into place. Then another room with one lone person sitting in a chair, dressed like your everyday civilian with just a weird grin on his face. All of it looked so out of place to the regular human, but Mills was smiling at me like it was just another day. So what is all this? Well, what have you heard about Roswell 1947? He shot back at me, and I shrugged as he continued. Doppelgangers, dark matter, all kinds of weird stuff out there that the regular Joe doesn't get to know about. Come on, you want some coffee? So you mean all the little green men cartoons and stuff like that? They're all real. Like not even an exaggeration or change to how they look. I sat next to him, taking the mug of coffee that he offered and sipping it slow. It burned a little, but that burn was helping to distract me from the crisis going on in my head at the moment. Best way to hide something is to do it in plain sight, he retorted. And they're not green, as you can see. More of a gray pallor, though they look a lot like a corpse in most lighting. That one there is perfectly healthy though, as far as we can tell. How can you tell? It looks dead. Well, we don't have anything that can pierce its skin. And of course, vitals aren't going to be the same as what we measure for ourselves. But they have picked up brainwaves, from as far as 60 feet away even. That's why that room has lead walls 3 feet thick. That thing will start talking into your brain if you're close enough. He muttered, his face flickering for a moment from being playful to a look of horror. Telepathy? I asked. He only nods. Some crazy Professor X stuff if I've ever seen it. I went through it myself on one of my first guard duties here. They didn't have the walls thick enough yet, and when I passed by on rounds, it started screaming in my head. I nearly choked on the hot coffee, earning myself a coughing fit in the process. What did it say? It begged me to let it go. And then when it realized that I couldn't do that, it started begging me to kill it. It hasn't moved from that table in almost 80 years it's been here, so I think it's paralyzed or something, totally unable to move. Probably happened in the crash. Was like it was reading my mind though, because I barely got the thought out and it was screaming curses at me for letting it live. Yeah, like I had a choice. Uncle Sam would have me erased from existence if I did that. He looked around the monitors. Can't say I blame it for asking though. Must be a heck of an existence just to be stuck there like that. I just couldn't compute what was happening. Somewhere in my brain was a voice going, well, of course aliens exist, while a whole other section was telling me that this makes everything that I've ever known a total lie. Why did I even get picked for this post? I'm nothing remarkable. I haven't done anything bad to piss off superiors. So why would they put me here and shatter my entire worldview? Did somebody really just hate me? Or was I just another faceless rank that they tossed on a job? Just don't let it get to you too bad, alright? Mills said, a genuine concern on his face now. Hey, I know it's a lot to take in, but trust me, it gets normal after a while. Just don't think too hard on any of it. The rest of the day was spent watching monitors and doing rounds. Between our patrols, that Mills clued me in on the guests that were kept around here. The gray was obviously the big deal, but the other things on screen were a whole other ball game of weird. The disc thing was the ship the gray arrived in. Not too big of a surprise there. Mills said that they haven't been able to crack the thing since the crash though. There's no door in and no visible way out, and nothing we have can get through the hull. Though the guy with the arc welder gave it his best for about 3 hours before finally calling it quits. Dark matter was what he called the massive darkness in the lighted room. Said he wasn't sure where the heck they found it, but anything that went into the dark never came out. There were at least 10 high-powered UV lamps in that room that acted as a deterrent, and apparently it could assimilate any sort of shadow or darkness, potentially using it to escape. By far the creepiest one though was the doppelganger. Mills had mentioned to me that it had breached containment once before, able to nearly perfectly imitate any human that it wants. About brought the entire place down and killed 5 guards before they got it back into a cell. It just sat there, totally rigid, upright, smiling huge with pointed and human teeth that gave away that it wasn't one of us. The thing gave me a shiver every time the rotating cameras passed back over it. I went home that night unable to sleep. I know it seems cliche, but finding out that we aren't alone in this universe is terrifying. Like ruin your entire worldview level stuff. I was raised a Baptist, and even though I didn't hold to it, I started to question if God was even real. And if he was, why would he make anything like what was being kept in Area 51? That was 4 days ago. The next 2 days were uneventful for the most part. Some conspiracy theorists were trying to climb one of the fences near the upper base, but here underground in the lower base, nobody knew that we were there. Mills about drove me out of my mind with small talk. The guy is nice and everything, but when you're looking at aliens and deadly mimics on security cameras, it seems kind of trivial to discuss your favorite food or what was on television the night before. Last night though, everything changed. I got in for my first solo guard duty. Guess 3 days of training was expected to be enough time to acclimate myself to the horrors of the universe Uncle Sam was hiding deep below the Nevada desert. Wish I had called out, if we're being honest. Around 9:30, not long after the last rays of sunlight had finally faded over the horizon, I went on my first patrol of the night. Through the long tunnel down to the cells area, a long hallway each holding cells about 30 feet apart with most of that space filled with solid concrete between rooms. There were other guards on duty, of course. Each cell had 2 men posted outside, ready in case anything might make a break for it. From the cells, it was back upstairs to upper base and R&D where they were trying to crack the disc once again. This time with a massive laser setup that looked like it could do some gnarly damage if aimed elsewhere. Nothing out of the ordinary so far. When I got back to the monitor room, it was around 10:30. And going through the cameras, and nothing was really out of the ordinary. The dark matter had the UV lights all the way up, a normal precaution during the night hours. Why, when we were over 100 feet below ground, is beyond my pay grade. It's not like sunlight is reaching down here to help during the day. The doppelganger was sitting and staring into the corner. I didn't stay on the camera for too long because it made me shiver involuntarily. It was like no matter if it was facing you or not, it could always see you. I swear that it was watching me more than I was watching it, and there was no way that it could see me. Eventually, I hit the outer cameras. These things were all over the surface, disguised as cactuses, shrubbery, random rocks. Whatever could hide a camera had one in it, covering every possible inch of the surface above the real base. It was camera 46 that stood out tonight though. I don't know if I would have noticed it if it weren't a clear night. Every star in the sky was visible through the cams, shining bright to show the entire desert. Except right up in the top left side of the camera's view. There the stars were blinking and moving ever so slightly, wavering from side to side like something was swinging them around for its own amusement. As I stared, it began to affect more of the stars nearby. nearly engulfing everything in view before finally settling in. As I looked closer, reaching for my radio to call one of the surface guards, something flashed. Every camera went out along with the lights. The base shut down completely for a moment, darkness taking over as whatever flashed outside cut off the electricity. Before I could even reach for a flashlight, it was back on though. My face was mirrored on the black screen, a look of fear in my eyes. I booted everything back up, looking close as it took its sweet time, desperate to bring camera 46 back up so that I could see what was going on. My worried expression stared back at me as alarms began going off across the base. Attention, lockdown protocols are now active. Please stay at your post and report any strange occurrences. Lockdown protocols are now active. Do not under any circumstances open the cell doors. The screen came back on, but it wasn't on camera 46. Instead, there was my own face still staring back at me, but this time in full HD color. Rows of sharp teeth and a huge grin smiling right at me. I nearly fell back out of my chair when I realized that the doppelganger was staring straight into the camera and taunting me. I don't know how it had taken my face, whether it could just sense me there through the camera or it just did it randomly, but it freaked me out. Wash, what are you doing in there, man? The radio started cackling. I could barely hear it through my own racing heartbeat. One of these superior officers on the base calling for me to check in. Meanwhile, the doppelganger was still just staring at me over the screen, daring me to make some kind of move or come after it. My hand shaky and reaching for the radio, I pushed the button down to talk back. Yes, sir, I'm here. My voice sounded distant, frail. The smile on the doppelganger seemed to get bigger as my fear grew. What happened out there? Did you see anything on the surveillance? He shot back. There was something in the sky like it was shimmering. Then a flash and everything went out. I stammered back. Oh, son of a... They're back. He was shouting now. Who's back? Good God, you would think if there was some history of attacks on this place, they would have clued me in so I could keep an eye out. The Greys, he replied. And that was when a huge explosion sent a tremor through the building. Switching through the cameras back to the one above ground, I could see that the sky wasn't empty anymore. There were at least 3 discs, just like the one being kept down here in R&D, hovering in the sky. One fired off a thin beam of light towards the ground, causing another tremor to rock the base. Lights flickered but didn't quite go out this time. I need somebody with eyes outside to answer me. What is happening? Another voice came over the radio. Multiple hostiles spotted over lower and upper bases. We're under attack. Somebody else answered. Clicking through the screens, even more of the discs were visible over the above-ground base, already firing off shots at the building up there and sending them up in flames. It took everything in me not to just sit in the corner and cower, desperate to believe that this was just a bad dream. We've got worse problems. The dark matter escaped when the power went out. It's not looking good, he said. Should I run? I was trying to come up with any kind of plan to get out of here, forget my job. The only means of escape that I knew was through the tunnel back up to the upper base though. Even if I had managed to escape up there, there's still the problem of these flying saucers that would probably evaporate me on sight. Maybe my best hope was to just stay down here out of sight and out of mind, and wait for everything to calm down before I escape. Ah! Another voice over the radio screaming out in pain. Help! Send reinforcements to upper base. They're coming in. I flipped the cameras over, watching as the discs let out an even larger beam of light. On the ground where they shone, more of the aliens suddenly began to appear. They looked just like the one laying on the table down the hallway, but far more dangerous. A soldier moved towards them, raising his gun and firing off a couple of rounds at one of the aliens' massive heads. The bullet stopped in front of it like the Matrix, hovering in midair for a moment before falling harmlessly to the ground below. The gray didn't take that particularly well. Honestly, I can't say that I would blame it. Getting shot at is never something that you just shrug off. But it simply looked at the soldier, barely even moving its head. What I saw next was something that no horror movie or years of watching Live Leak could have prepared me for. Something picked the shooter up, raising him into the air with invisible hands. He struggled against it, begging it to let him go. Before anybody else could step up to help, though, he began folding in on himself. I could hear the bones cracking over the cameras. Thank God, but I could vaguely hear his screams of pain as they were caught by the small microphone. He kept folding smaller and smaller until he was barely the size of a baseball, compressed into an orb of flesh and pulverized bone, dripping blood as it hovered there over the ground. Oh my God, I muttered as the gray simply moved its head slightly, sending the flesh ball flying through the stomach of another soldier that was approaching. It went straight through the poor guy, making a huge hole as it blew chunks of intestines and bone through his back. The gray continued on, unimpeded as it simply crushed anyone that got in its way. I could only watch in terror as it walked calmly through a dozen men, taking them all out without even lifting a finger. More began to beam down to the surface, following it toward its goal and joining the march. "Fall back. Air support is inbound." The radio crackled to life once more. On one of the big monitors, I could see a jet take off from one of the nearby runways, already beginning to veer back around so that it could fire a shot at the discs floating nearby. 2 choppers took off around the same time, taking their own positions close by. Before I knew it, the plane and choppers all fired off their shots, aiming for the cluster of discs. A bright flash of light came from the disc closest to the ground, causing munitions to explode in midair before they could even touch the alien vessels. A smaller laser erupted from it next, quickly spinning around the edge of the disc. As it passed through the choppers and plane in a clean arc, they split, flames engulfing them from the subsequent explosion. It was pure chaos outside. Nothing that we had could possibly stand up to these things. There was no other choice but to run. Except I couldn't. The grays would be coming through the tunnel and that was my only way out. The other way was the cells, and after hearing about the darkness escaping, I don't think it was worth the risk. All I could do was wait. There's no point risking a direct run-in unless I wanted to die horribly. No, it was time to hunker down and wait for the storm to pass. I got up, closed the door and locked it, and tried to move what spare furniture that I had in front to block it off further. If anything got in here, I only had my handgun on me, and God knows that was like hunting a bear with a water gun. Nope, I gotta play this smart and avoid any kind of confrontation. If only it was that easy. I kept my eyes on the monitors after that, tracing movements of the grays while keeping an eye on the lower cells. They were, well, the dark matter obviously wasn't in its cell anymore. The lights were on, but they were simply illuminating the bright white room now. Where the darkness had managed to go, I'm not really sure. There were a dozen guards stationed at each end of the cell block though, each shining a UV light around, trying to illuminate any shadowy corners where it could have been hiding. Another explosion made the ground under my feet tremble. The grays had broken through the tunnel now and begun a slow but deliberate descent towards the lower base. They would probably pass me in around 10 minutes, meaning that I just needed to keep holding out. The other monitors showed that my time here was coming to an end though. The lights flickered when that explosion came through, plunging the cell block hallway into total darkness for just a fraction of a second. That was all that the dark matter had needed though. It must have used that brief time to flank around the soldiers at one end of the hallway, and as they were still flinging their lights around desperately, shadows suddenly began to swallow them one by one. It was like, well, it was almost cartoonish. They were just falling right into these massive pits of darkness that would appear on the wall or the floor, like a cartoon gag, but when they got sucked in it looked painful. Like they were entering a black hole and being torn into shreds as it pulled them in. "Hey man, let me in." Somebody began knocking at my door. They sounded terrified, and I can't say I blame them. "Come on, they're coming. Don't let them get me, please." "Hold on, I've got to move the furniture." I shouted back through, starting to move the chairs. "Please, Wash, hurry. They're gonna kill me if they see me." He shouted back through as I was starting to unlock the door. I froze instead, a hand just about to turn the deadbolt and let him through. Slowly, I turned back to the monitors, afraid that I was right about what I was about to see. The only other person on base that I had spoken to and given my name was the commanding officer on Upper Base and Mills. Neither of them were here tonight. Sure enough, as I faced the monitor, I saw the room that the doppelganger was being held in. Empty. "Wash, let me in," the voice shouted again. Something was off about it, like it was more than one voice saying the same thing, but talking out of turn so that they didn't quite harmonize. "Let me in, let me in." All I could do was pile the chairs in front of the door again, desperately hoping that it would go away. I don't know how it knew my name, but when it spoke, my blood ran cold. There was pure malice in its voice, and all I could feel was that it was going to hurt me. I got this distinct feeling that it didn't want to kill me though, only inflict as much pain as it could. My blood ran cold as I made my way back behind my desk, climbing under it and holding hands over my ears as it just kept screaming at me. The voice kept changing, turning into other people as it first begged me to let it in, and then turned more violent, demanding that I open the door for it to get through. Before long, it must have gotten bored though, because it stopped knocking on the door and shouting. I waited a few minutes, afraid if I came out of my hiding spot, it would just be waiting there on the other side of the desk. That huge grin full of teeth, ready to devour me within seconds as soon as it saw me. I took a deep breath, crawling out little by little as the monitors above me blared with chaos. Everything on Upper Base was a disaster. Fire all over the place. Even if I could get through the tunnel and get back there, making it through the flames was going to be a whole other challenge. God, I didn't even know if my car was crushed out there considering all the carnage. A walk through the desert in the middle of the night was almost as dangerous as the aliens attacking from every direction. The lights flickered again as another explosion rocked the base. Looking at the monitors, I could see the grays approaching my section of the tunnel. All I could do was keep quiet, hoping that they didn't try to look in here as they continued along their warpath. Too much to ask, especially for my luck. The first gray that was leading the pack stopped in front of my door. It raised a hand and I heard the metal begin to bend and creak. Diving back onto the desk, I pulled myself in as much as I could, desperate to avoid being seen as it ripped the door from the hinges without even touching it. Pretty sure that I involuntarily squealed a little when the door hit the wall, falling to the floor with an even louder bang as the gray stepped into the room. I saw its feet as it walked around for a moment, inspecting its surroundings for whatever it was looking for. It stopped in front of the monitor, staying there for the longest minute of my life, as it studied them before walking back out, leading the rest of the grays forward. At that point, I could only assume they were after the one that was laying in the cell down the hall, and guess aliens have the same code of no man left behind that we do. Who says that we have nothing in common, right? Too bad they were slaughtering us to make sure that it happened. I have to get out of here. There are no excuses now. I was exposed to the dangers outside without a door on the hinges. I had to move fast. Looking at the monitors, the grays were far enough ahead in the tunnel that I could slip out without them noticing. I poked my head out, making sure there were no stragglers that could fold me like origami with their mind, and I started my escape. Running as fast as I could towards Upper Base, I was quickly out of breath. The incline in here was killer, and God knows it's at least a couple of miles directly up. But nevertheless, I've got to keep trying. I managed to get maybe halfway there before I came across a body. It was slumped next to a wall, head down and blood all over the front of its uniform. As I got closer, trying to give it a wide berth, it began to cough. I paused, unsure of what my next move should be. If it's another soldier, the obvious answer is that I should help, right? But then there was the other chance nagging at the back of my mind. I've had this pit in my stomach since the run-in with the doppelganger. This guy could just be that thing trying to lure and prey. If it is, well, then trying to help him is a death sentence. Help! A weak voice came through the coughing. Ah, heck, I can't leave them in good conscience to die on the slight chance that they could be that monster. I know it goes against self-preservation, but I can't leave him here. Hey man, what got you? I said, moving toward him slowly. His head tilted a little, looking for where my voice was coming from. As he looked up, I could see that although he was pretty messed up, he was definitely human. His throat was slashed pretty bad though, and judging by the amount of blood everywhere, he wasn't making it out of this tunnel. That thing disguised itself as one of us, he gurgled out. The doppelganger then. It had been through here already. Was I going to have to face it when I get to the upper base? Before I could think further, he kept talking. He tore out their throats and his teeth, ate them while they were still screaming. I tried stabbing him, but he slashed me. Oh, I don't think I'm going to make it. It's cold. Hey, stay with me, okay? I'm going to get help and come back here for you, alright? I said. Is that death? He asked, pointing towards the tunnel going to the lower base. I looked forward, squinting as the light seemed to dim. It was definitely getting darker. Uh-oh, was all that I could get out before a long shadow appeared in the middle of the room, steadily getting closer as it made its way out. God knows what this thing can do once it hits outside, but I wasn't about to stay around here and figure it out. I grabbed the soldier, hoisting him over my shoulder and starting to move as fast as we could. This guy was dead weight, almost cold to the touch too, not able to contribute at all to escaping certain death. We got a few feet before I tripped over one of his legs while trying to haul his limp body, dropping him as I fell to the ground. The shadow caught up, taking hold of one of his feet first and then slowly drawing the rest of him in. Whatever blood that he had left in there slowly seeping out as it crumpled his body into shadow. Look, it might seem like I got over it quick, but I promise once the dark had him, there was no saving him. Instead, I ran my butt off, heading towards upper base as fast as I could in the hopes that I could outrun the primordial dark that was still devouring a man behind me. After a minute, I could tell that I was getting close. Smoke began to fill the tunnel, causing me to nearly choke as I ran, gasping for breath desperately. Emerging from the tunnel almost made me want to go back in and chance it with the darkness. The discs filled the sky above and everything was on fire. I had to move carefully, afraid that they were going to vaporize me in seconds if they caught sight of me. My best bet was to go around the main building and find my way to the parking lot. If my car wasn't totaled, then I could maybe wait out the discs until they leave, and then get the heck out of Dodge. It was a pretty far-fetched plan, but it was all that I had at the time. Slowly, sticking to whatever shadows that I could with the fear that they might devour me any second, I made my way from the tunnel entrance to the R&D building. Logically, the parking lot was on the other side of it, so I could just go straight through the building and out the other side, minimizing my risk of being seen by the discs or the Greys as they made the return trip. Inside of R&D it was rough. There were various aircraft in differing stages of construction, with pieces and parts all over the place. Different testing arrays lit up on one side of the massive hangar, while down at the far end there was something making a continuous beeping noise. Further on to my left I could see one of the discs, the one that we had in our inventory from the old crash. The big laser cutter was still sitting nearby, lights blinking on a control panel to show that it had been abandoned mid-use. A loud crash made me jump. Just up ahead in shadows between the fluorescent bulbs was a soldier. He had pushed something over, seemingly on the hunt for something in the huge hangar. I tried to hide from it, trying to quietly duck towards one of the walls and out of the fluorescent lights where it could see me. Unfortunately for me, this place was a mess, and I tripped over a rolling toolbox that was in the path, causing it to crash to the ground. Not sure what I expected to happen, but the creature let out a roar when it heard the noise, now aware that it wasn't alone in here. The roar was quickly stifled though, instead being replaced by a discordant voice that phased in and out of normal range, moving from male to female, adult to child as it tried to modulate. As it turned, I kept going to try and hide, even though it felt futile. "Come here," it shouted, moving towards where I was ducked down behind a workbench. "You son of a, get over here." As it got closer, I could feel the sense of dread in my stomach growing. I couldn't make out the face covered in shadows, but where its eyes were seemed to be shining, reflecting little bits of light like a predator's will in the dark, looking for its next meal. I don't know if it could see in the dark, but I could swear that it was honing in on me with ease. "Wash, it's you!" The doppelganger shouted now. Must have seen me. I had to make a run for it. Hell with giving my position away. If I was faster, I could make it to the far door and get out of here before it had a chance to catch up. "Come here!" It moved faster. Faster than I had ever seen any human move in my life, seemingly going down on all fours to run at me faster. As it closed in, I fell back, crashing to the ground beside the disc as it gained ground on me. Looking around, I grabbed my gun from its holster, leveling it at the doppelganger and firing. My aim was good, and the bullet hit it right in the face, making its head blast back for a moment. "Now why would you do that?" it said again. The voice was more discordant this time, hundreds of different inflections and tones all fighting for supremacy under the tide of noise. The prevailing feeling that I got from it now wasn't just malice, it was anger. I had pissed it off and now it really wanted to hurt me, even more so than before. I scrambled, firing off more shots into the monster. They each hit but did nothing when it came to slowing it down. The bullets were useless, and as I looked around, my only options were crowbars, various mechanic tools, and the laser. I have no idea how to use this thing, so I just had to hope that when it was left here, they had already primed it so it was ready to go. The doppelganger lurched frontward, screaming at me in an ancient language that I couldn't understand. I turned the dial on the console all the way towards the top to max it out, and hit the green button that was lit up next to it. The light that came out of that thing was practically blinding. I closed my eyes, turning my head as it flashed. I could hear that creature screaming even louder now, and smelled something burning as the laser hit it. After a moment, the light died down and I finally opened my eyes. The doppelganger lay on the ground, half its face melted and the entire torso on fire. It was twitching on the ground, still cursing me in that ancient language, but unable to keep moving. I'll be honest, I wasn't going to wait to see what happened to it. I ran, heading towards the back door and bursting through it. On the other side of the road, there was the parking lot. My car was parked in the back corner, and from the looks of it, it was still intact. I kept to the back wall, desperate to avoid being seen, and continued slowly moving across the road towards my car. After a moment, I finally made it, pulling out keys and unlocking the door manually so that the lights didn't alert anything to my presence. Before I could get in, I looked across at the burning base and tunnel entrance to see the Greys emerge. The one that had been prisoner was floating alongside the others, levitating out of the tunnel with whatever powers they had used to tear dozens of soldiers apart. As they emerged, the discs began to shine their lights down, beaming them up into the ships one by one. Just to be safe, I ducked down in my seat and waited to see if they would leave. After the last Grey was picked up, the discs fired off a few more lasers before rising into the sky, suddenly blinking out and disappearing completely. As they left, a laser suddenly hit the R&D building, causing it to explode and hit me with a blast of heat. That was the last thing that I needed to tell me that this wasn't the place to be. Turning the key, I threw it into drive and hit the gas, nearly smashing into another car when it had lurched forward. I steered around it, hitting the road and flooring the pedal towards the entrance. The guard arm was down, but I smashed straight through it, unwilling to wait for it to raise. Not like there was still guards at the gate to raise it anymore. The flames were in my rear view for almost 20 minutes, burning into the night sky as I drove as far away as I could. I came home surprised that a cop didn't pull me over for speeding. At some point, a bunch of fire trucks passed me, heading towards the base to deal with the chaos that I had left behind. About 6 hours ago, I walked into the door of my apartment and I haven't looked back. Typing this up just seems silly now, considering all that I've gone through in the past 12 hours. I've been looking out my window every 5 minutes, waiting to see black vans roll up ready to cart me off to some black site where I'll never be heard from again. I don't think I'll be lucky enough to have some aliens come break me out if they do take me, but dang it, they are real. They're out there and we're not alone. If this country is smart, they won't try picking any more fights with them.